Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Snow Day, your number one stop for reviews, rants, and ratings in the world of entertainment. I am your host, Hunter Verrill. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Snow Day. It is going to be the last podcast of the school year, so I figured in order to keep things with the theme of getting over the hump, I'm going to be talking about getting good. Specifically in FromSoft games, and specifically in Dark Souls, because I'm currently finishing up Dark Souls 1. Now, I made a podcast earlier complaining about the late game of Dark Souls, and I still do stay with those opinions. There are some ridiculous placements throughout that game, not just in the ending, that are very clearly there in order to be hard instead of challenging. And the thing is, I still stand with my idea of a perfect FromSoft or just Soulsborne game is one that has the least amount of moments that are unfair. Because it doesn't matter how hard you make it. If it's rewarding, understandable, and all of your deaths are earned, it's fine. The ending boss of Sekiro is the hardest thing I've done in a video game, but because every time I died, I would be able to say to myself, this is why I died, and this is what I could have done to prevent that, I was fine. The whole time it was just incredible until one time I got him. It was the fastest my heart has raced in so long. My hands were just pools of sweat, and I was just screaming over and over again because I'd finally done it. The wave that washed over me, I've not felt anything like it since. It was incredible. And it's always so funny because that even while I'm playing FromSoft games and I'm really into the thick of like the garbage moments, I absolutely despise them, but I still love them at the same time. Like I will talk day in and day out to myself or my friends when I'm stuck in those moments about how garbage the game is, how the design is ridiculous, how it's remembered fondly only for its lore, world building, and characters, even when I don't really mean it. And sometimes I do mean it, but the problem is I've noticed that I always recall them more fondly after I've finished them. I still enjoy my time during, but it's always when I finish that I'm finally able to be like, this was incredible. This was a good experience. I've grown as a person because of blah, 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 blah. And I really hope Dark Souls will be the same for me because this has been the most trouble I've had with any Soulsborne. I beat Bloodborne first, and then Sekiro, and then Nioh. And I had less trouble with those than I did with Dark Souls. And it's always such a funny thing to think about that just as the same thing that it's interesting to see what different people and streamers struggle with different bosses, that people struggle with different Soulsborne games entirely. Like, specifically, I remember PewDiePie was playing through the DLC of Bloodborne, and one of the easiest bosses in the entire Soulsborne series is named Living Failures, and he just got absolutely destroyed by them, like over and over. He was dying so many times. And then when he got to the Orphan of Kos, which is considered the hardest boss in the entire Soulsborne lineage, he got it first try. It's hilarious to see what people struggle with because they all seem to have different bosses that kick their crap in. It's so odd, and I still don't really know what it comes down to, but I really hope it'll be researched to find out like what part of us makes us struggle differently with different bosses. Like, I remember one of my friends from DS1, they were telling me about how the Iron Golem just gave them so much trouble and they died so many times, and I was like, I got that second try. How did you? And they were just floored. It's so fun to have conversations about this game because everyone's experience is so different. The bosses are so dynamic and there's so many branching paths. Everyone always talks about how Blighttown is the hardest area and it's so unfair. I thought Blighttown was one of the easiest areas. I had no trouble there. I went through an alternate entrance from the Valley of Drakes, just went down the ladders, rested at a bonfire, ran to Quelag, and just got her. I don't understand why it's remembered as just, the worst place, the hardest part. Like, have you guys played Tomb of the Giants? That place is awful. And even then, I got past that eventually, but God, I hated Tomb of the Giants. Wow. Anyway, I digress. What I'm trying to talk about here is finally overcoming something, because although it's easy to talk about finally getting over a hard boss or a hard area, one thing that I've really noticed with every Soulsborne game, and not just for myself, but everyone else that plays and enjoys them, is that there's always a certain moment where you become competent And it's so weird because the genre, or subgenre even, because it's so niche, it has a feel to it. Like, they're all almost exactly the same in a good way. They're not exactly the same. They're similar. They're very similar. Their skeletons are the same, I should say. But it's so odd because every single one of them has a different feel to them, like distinctly. Anytime I come back to play Bloodborne or Sekiro, I need to go at it for a few hours before I'm finally back in the feel, even if I've been playing a different FromSoft game. They all have distinctly different speeds, movement, enemy types, and ways of engaging. Dark Souls is heavily dodge, or especially in the first game, shield focused on combat. Bloodborne completely throws shields out the window. They wanted to make so clear to players that shields were just not going to work. The only shield you can get in that game is this really crappy wooden board, and the description explicitly says it wouldn't be good for combat in Yharnam, which is the place in which the setting of Bloodborne. And it's so funny because Dark Souls had parries at times, but it was always a thing that if an enemy was like slightly bigger than you, well, significantly bigger than you wouldn't be able to parry them. The only enemies you could parry were ones that were similar to your size and had weapons similar to the size of yours. So it was very selective parrying. In Bloodborne, you can parry almost anything. There are bosses that you can parry, and it's incredible because you can just pull out a gun at the most opportune time, shoot them just before they land a strike, and get a parry out. It was such a rewarding system, and it was so fast. I'm showing my bias for Bloodborne, but regardless, it's when you find that out that you are finally able to just blast through Bloodborne. Not to say that you just don't die anymore, you're still going to die a lot, but the progress that you make always ends up being more rewarding than your setbacks, and that's not always the case, unfortunately, very early on. Bloodborne is incredible to me because it does this with the very first required boss, Father Gascoigne, because in the very first area, they want to make painfully clear to the player, you have to play this game by its rules. If you dodge away from him, you're going to die a lot faster than if you dodge into him. You have to learn how to use that gun because you have to be able to parry him. He does not stagger at all. He is going to come at you and he's not going to stop. And so being forced to learn these things in an environment that's like, learning to swim in a pool full of sharks, it works because it forces you to learn the game's mechanics in a short amount of time, and not only that, but apply them constantly without ever breaking. Like the third phase of Father Gascoigne, he becomes a werewolf, and you have genuinely no time to heal. There is no one place that you can run away to that will give you enough time to put 2 blood vials in. I've maybe gotten 1 in, and if he lands 1 hit on you, you're gone. There's nothing to do, and it's so great, I guess, that you just have zero room for error. Even on New Game Plus, I had set Bloodborne aside for a bit, and I wanted to come back and do it a second time, and the way that FromSoft games usually work is that when you come back for a second playthrough, you start again in the story, but with your character's current weapons, stats, etc. And I died to him on New Game Plus so many times still, because I had to get back into the feel. Same thing with Sekiro. There are so many things that are different with Sekiro from other FromSoft and Soulsborne titles that you have to get back into the feeling. The movement is much more floaty and action movie-like. There's so much of an emphasis on deflection that you can't really go for dodging or jumping unless you're explicitly told to by the game, which works for the game's combat system, which I've discussed in depth earlier. And it's just such a rewarding process because, like with Dark Souls, that moment for me came so late. It was around like Ornstein and Smo almost. Like, it was so late for me, but it was so worth it once it finally came around. The idea that I have to improve. I have to learn how to dodge. Like, Bell Gargoyles, incredible boss, because even if you've never played a Soulsborne in your life, you have to get incredibly good at dodging and understand how the weight system of Dark Souls works. It is so much easier to fight them as a light roller than a mid or fat roller. And as such, you have to learn how everything works together. Weapons, shields, armor, everything that comes together in order to make the game's combat so satisfying. What a great bunch of games. Alright, this is kind of hard to say goodbye to, but hopefully you've enjoyed the episodes that I've had for this year. It's been a joy making them. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next snow day.